The time is 10:22 a.m. The South China Sea, 31 nautical miles west of Scarborough Shoal, in international waters that China calls sovereign territory, and that the rest of the world's maritime lawyers call a navigable ocean. The sky is clear, the sea state is moderate, and the visibility is excellent. The kind of morning that makes everything visible for miles in every direction, which is relevant because what is visible this morning includes, among other things, an Arleigh Burke class guided missile destroyer, and, closing from the northwest at 14 knots, the largest Coast Guard vessel in the world. The USS Mustin DDG-89 is conducting a freedom of navigation operation in international waters. Routine in concept, never entirely routine in practice in this particular body of water, where Beijing's definition of routine and Washington's definition of routine diverge in ways that have been producing incidents, diplomatic protests, and after-action reports for the better part of a decade. The Mustin has done this before. Her crew has done this before. The script is familiar. What is slightly less familiar this morning is the specific vessel approaching from the northwest. The China Coast Guard cutter bearing down on the Mustin is the Haijing 3901, a Type 3901 class cutter, 165 meters in length, displacing approximately 12,000 tons, equipped with a 76mm main gun, a helicopter hangar, and, most relevantly for this morning's proceedings, a high-pressure water cannon system mounted forward of the bridge that can project seawater at pressures sufficient to seriously affect the operation of small vessels, and at volumes that make an impression even on larger ones. The Haijing 3901 is, by tonnage, larger than many naval destroyers. It is larger, in fact, than the USS Mustin, which displaces approximately 9,200 tons. This size differential is the foundation of the morning's operational concept from the Chinese side. Beijing has deployed oversized Coast Guard vessels in the South China Sea for a specific reason. They are civilian law enforcement vessels under international law, which means the rules governing responses to their provocations are different from the rules governing responses to naval vessels, and their sheer physical scale creates a psychological and navigational pressure that smaller vessels cannot easily dismiss. The concept is not stupid. It is, in fact, operationally clever. A Coast Guard vessel cannot be engaged by a warship using weapons that would be appropriate against a naval contact. It exists in a legal category that constrains the responses available to the ship it is confronting. Its presence is a form of legal and physical pressure that is distinct from military threat and therefore harder to counter using military means. The concept is not stupid. The application this morning is going to be something else. In the Combat Information Center, the Tactical Action Officer had been tracking the Haijing 3901 since it appeared on the surface picture at 9:47 a.m. at a range of 18 nautical miles. The contact had been classified within 4 minutes using the AN/SPS-67 surface search radar's cross-section measurement and the SLQ-32's emission characterization of the cutter's navigation and communication systems. The specific hull, Haijing 3901, China's largest and most capable Coast Guard cutter, sometimes referred to in naval circles as the __, quote, _0__, had been in the threat library since its commissioning and its radar and communication signature profile was well documented. The tactical action officer had noted the classification, noted the contact's course and speed, projected its intercept point with the Mustin's current track, and made the standard assessment that this was a China Coast Guard close approach event. The kind of thing that generates a contact report, a radio exchange, and a lot of documentation, but does not generate engagement solutions, because the Haijing 3901 is, legally and operationally, a Coast Guard vessel. He had also noted, because good watch officers note everything, that the Haijing 3901's approach bearing and speed profile were consistent with an intercept designed to achieve a specific relative position rather than simply to cross the Mustin's track. The cutter was going to end up alongside, at close range, in a position geometrically suited for exactly the kind of close approach pressure operation that the CCG had been developing as a standard tool for contested waters. He picked up his coffee. This was going to be a long morning. Now here is where the Haijing 3901 requires the technical introduction that its designers would probably appreciate, and its operators this morning would prefer you not hear. The Type 3901 cutter is genuinely impressive as a piece of maritime engineering. 12,000 tons, capable of extended blue water operations, equipped with a helicopter facility, a water cannon system that represents a genuine capability against smaller vessels, and the kind of endurance that allows it to maintain a persistent presence in disputed waters for extended periods. China built it specifically for operations in the South China Sea, specifically to project a Coast Guard presence that is legally distinct from naval presence, but physically larger than many naval vessels. It is the right tool for confronting Philippine Coast Guard cutters, Vietnamese fishing vessels, and other vessels that are either smaller than it or legally constrained from responding to it with appropriate force. It is not the right tool for confronting an Arleigh Burke class guided missile destroyer. This distinction is what the morning's events will illustrate, with the specific clarity that comes from very expensive engineering, meeting a problem it was not designed to solve. The Haijing 3901 closed to 4 nautical miles at 10:31 a.m. and transmitted on the bridge-to-bridge channel. U.S. warship, this is China Coast Guard vessel 3901. You are operating in Chinese territorial waters without authorization. This is a serious violation of China's sovereignty. You are required to depart this area immediately. Failure to comply will result in necessary enforcement measures. The Mustin's officer of the deck responded within 8 seconds in the flat professional register that has become the standard voice of U.S. freedom of navigation operations in contested waters. Underscore, underscore, quote underscore 2, underscore, underscore. The exchange was logged, time-stamped, and would appear verbatim in the after-action report alongside the 17 previous exchanges of essentially identical content that various U.S. warships had logged in similar encounters over the past several years. The Haijing 3901's crew knew this response was coming. The Mustin's crew knew the Haijing 3901 knew. The exchange is a ritual with a fixed script, which both sides perform because the performance is itself a form of documentation. The Haijing 3901 did not respond verbally. It closed to 2 nautical miles. At 2 nautical miles in the South China Sea, between a 12,000-ton Coast Guard cutter, and a 9,200-ton guided missile destroyer, the size differential becomes visually apparent in a way that it isn't at 4 nautical miles. The Haijing 3901, viewed from the Mustin's bridge at 2 miles, is a large vessel. It is bigger than the Mustin. Its water cannon, mounted forward of the bridge and clearly visible, is a piece of equipment with obvious purpose. The Mustin's bridge team noted all of this with the professional attention that is the appropriate response to a large vessel closing to 2 nautical miles in a contested waterway. On the Mustin's bridge wing, the officer of the deck stepped outside and looked at the Haijing 3901 with the naked eye. It was, he noted in the log, a very large ship. The water cannon was deployed, elevated to its operational position, pointed forward and slightly downward, in the configuration that the CCG uses when the cannon is ready for use rather than stowed. He noted this. He noted it because a deployed water cannon on a vessel at 2 nautical miles is a statement of intent, and statements of intent get logged even when they don't rise to the level of hostile action. He went back inside and picked up the radio. At 10:38 a.m., the Haijing 3901 activated its water cannon. The cannon fired a sustained stream at a trajectory that arced across the water between the 2 vessels and fell into the sea approximately 400 meters short of the Mustin's hull. Not at the Mustin. Between the 2 ships, into international water, in a projection that was calibrated to be visible and demonstrative without constituting a direct strike on a U.S. Navy warship. The tactical action officer looked at the display. He looked at the water column that was visible on the bridge cameras, a high-pressure stream of seawater producing a sustained white column where it struck the surface of the South China Sea, approximately 400 meters from the Mustin's port side. He processed this for 3 seconds. A 12,000-ton Coast Guard vessel had just fired its water cannon into the water next to a U.S. Navy destroyer. He picked up his coffee. He found that he was, in a specific and professional way, not alarmed. He was interested. He was interested in the same way that a chess player is interested when their opponent makes a move that is simultaneously bold and categorically ineffective. A move that demonstrates commitment to a strategy without demonstrating any understanding of why the strategy cannot work against this particular opponent. The water cannon was fired at approximately 85 bar of pressure. At that pressure, at the range it was being deployed, it was capable of sweeping the deck of a fishing vessel, disabling the navigation equipment of a small Coast Guard cutter, or causing genuine problems for any vessel smaller than about 2,000 tons in a beam configuration. The Mustin displaces 9,200 tons. She is a steel warship. Her crew is inside a superstructure designed to operate in conditions that include weapons effects far more energetic than pressurized seawater. Her equipment is weatherproofed, sealed, and protected against the maritime environment as a basic engineering requirement of her design. At 400 meters against the Mustin's hull and superstructure, the water cannon's sustained output was having the approximate tactical effect of a garden hose aimed at a parked tank. On the Mustin's bridge, the officer of the deck watched the water column in the sea between the 2 ships. He watched it for a moment with the evaluative attention of a professional, assessing something that he had been briefed might happen and had not, until this moment, fully appreciated in its operational absurdity. A boatswain's mate who had been updating the deck log at the chart table behind the officer of the deck leaned slightly to look out the bridge window at the water column. He had been at sea for 11 years. He had a weathered professional face and the specific laconic quality that extended naval service produces in people who have seen a great deal and found that most of it does not require extensive commentary. He looked at the water column for approximately 4 seconds. "Sir," he said to the officer of the deck, in a tone of voice that was entirely neutral and somehow communicated an entire editorial position, "are they watering us?" The officer of the deck did not look away from the Haijing 3901. "Log it," he said. The boatswain's mate logged it. The log entry read, "6:7 is doing a lot of work in that log entry. It is also entirely accurate. The water cannon fired for 47 seconds. During those 47 seconds, the Mustin continued on her course and speed without deviation. Her sensors continued operating normally. Her crew continued their assigned watch duties. The flight deck crew, who had been conducting pre-flight checks on the SH-60B for a scheduled launch at 11 a.m., continued their pre-flight checks. The pre-flight checks were not affected by the water cannon. The water cannon was not reaching the flight deck. The water cannon was not reaching anything on the Mustin. The water cannon was producing a spectacular visual effect in the South China Sea approximately 400 meters to port, which the Mustin's external cameras were recording from multiple angles with the thoroughness of a surveillance system that records everything. At 10:38 a.m. and 47 seconds, the water cannon ceased. The Haijing 3901 held its position at 2 nautical miles. In the CDC, the SLQ-32 had been collecting continuously throughout the water cannon event and before it, and the collection picture from the past 53 minutes of close-range access to the Haijing 3901 was building into something analytically interesting. The Type 3901's communication suite had been active since the cutter first appeared on the picture at 9:47 a.m. Its primary channel had been communicating with what appeared to be a shore facility. The transmission pattern, power, and directional antenna characteristic were consistent with a relay to a CCG Maritime Operations Center on the Chinese mainland. The content was encrypted and not readable in real time, but the transmission had been continuous, which meant the shore facility was watching the encounter in real time. Someone in a CCG Operations Center had watched the water cannon activation and its 47 seconds of operation and its cessation, and had received whatever data the Haijing 3901 systems transmitted about its own performance during that window. The SLQ-32 logged the shore facility communication pattern throughout: frequency, transmission intervals, the slight power increase that accompanied the water cannon activation, and the return to baseline power after cessation. The water cannon activation had been accompanied by a change in the communications traffic, more frequent, higher power, consistent with reporting to the shore facility during an active employment event. The pattern provided a behavioral signature for CCG water cannon operations from the communications side, what the radio traffic looks like before, during, and after a water cannon activation. This signature was new. Previous collection had characterized CCG communications in normal patrol and close approach operations. The water cannon employment event produced a distinct communication signature that the analytical database had not previously contained. At 10:44 a.m., the Haijing 3901 fired its water cannon again. This time, the stream was directed at a slightly different trajectory, still falling short of the Mustin's hull, but at an arc that would have reached the ship's deck level if the range had been approximately 200 meters less. The tactical action officer noted the trajectory difference. The arc change was consistent with either a ranging adjustment, the cutter's operators calculating what range would be needed to reach the Mustin, or a demonstration of the cannon's elevation control to show that the trajectory could be adjusted. Either interpretation was interesting for different analytical reasons. The second activation lasted 61 seconds. During those 61 seconds, the SLQ-32 noted that the Haijing 3901's navigation radar had briefly shifted mode, a change consistent with the ship's helm making a minor course adjustment to optimize the water cannon's relative bearing on the Mustin. The radar mode shift was brief, lasting approximately 8 seconds, but it was characterizable, and it was logged. A Coast Guard cutter maneuvering to optimize water cannon bearing geometry against a U.S. Navy destroyer in international waters is a specific kind of absurdity that deserves documentation. It received documentation. The SH-60B launched from the Mustin's flight deck at 11:02 a.m., 2 minutes behind its planned 11 a.m. schedule. The 2-minute delay was not caused by the water cannon operations. It was caused by a pre-flight checklist item that required an additional verification step, a routine procedural delay of the kind that carrier aviation produces regularly, and that has nothing to do with Chinese Coast Guard vessels and their water management activities. The SH-60B climbed to 800 feet and established an orbit that provided a complete overhead picture of both the Mustin and the Haijing 3901. From 800 feet, the Haijing 3901 was clearly visible in its entirety. Its deck configuration, its antenna layout, its water cannon mounting geometry, and the positioning of its crew members during the encounter. The helicopter's FLIR sensor built a complete thermal profile of the cutter's engineering plant, propulsion configuration, and electronics layout from an altitude and angle that shore-based sensors cannot replicate. The helicopter crew's visual description of the Haijing 3901, transmitted to CIC, included several details that the surface radar picture had not resolved. The specific water cannon mount configuration, which differed slightly from the documented baseline in a way consistent with a recent upgrade. The positioning of a camera crew on the cutter's bridge wing, 3 individuals with what appeared to be professional video equipment recording the Mustin, and the presence of additional antenna arrays on the Haijing 3901's mast that were not in the existing documentation for this hull. The undocumented antenna arrays were flagged immediately. The SLQ-32's collection was queried for any emissions consistent with the new array's likely frequency bands. 2 previously uncategorized emissions from the Haijing 3901 were retroactively correlated with the antenna positions. The retroactive correlation updated the emissions collection to include what appeared to be a maritime radar intelligence collection system, a system designed to characterize the radar signatures of vessels the cutter operates alongside. The Haijing 3901 was collecting on the Mustin. The SLQ-32 was collecting on the Haijing 3901, collecting on the Mustin. The SH-60B was collecting on the Haijing 3901, collecting on the Mustin. The morning had achieved a specific recursive quality that the intelligence team found professionally satisfying. At 11:27 a.m., the Haijing 3901 activated its water cannon for a third time. This activation was the most precisely aimed of the three, the stream arcing to within approximately 280 meters of the Mustin's hull, the trajectory suggesting either improved ranging or a decision to demonstrate closer capability. 280 meters. The South China Sea swells were producing occasional spray at that distance. None of it reached the Mustin. The third activation lasted 38 seconds. During those 38 seconds, two things happened that the after-action report would note as operationally significant. First, the CCG Shore Facility's communications increased dramatically in volume and frequency, 3 times the transmission rate of the previous activations, higher power, longer messages. The analytical interpretation was that the shore facility was either providing guidance for the third activation or receiving a detailed report during it. The behavior was consistent with a more senior authority being involved in real-time management of the third, closer activation. Second, a P-8 Poseidon that had been conducting a maritime patrol 90 miles to the south repositioned toward the encounter area, arriving at altitude 40 miles to the southeast at 11:24 a.m., 3 minutes before the third water cannon activation. The P-8A's sensors added an additional collection layer to the existing SLQ-32 and SH-60B coverage, covering the Haijing 3901's acoustic signature and contributing a surface radar cross-section characterization from an aspect angle unavailable to the Mustin's own sensors. The morning's collection architecture had evolved from a single-ship sensor suite to a 3-platform collection system: the Mustin's SLQ-32, the SH-60B overhead, and the P-8A at altitude, all oriented on a Coast Guard cutter that had come to apply water pressure to a destroyer and was instead providing one of the more comprehensive involuntary intelligence collection opportunities of the year. After the third activation ceased at 11:27 a.m. and 38 seconds, the Haijing 3901 held its position for 14 minutes without further action. At 11:41 a.m., it increased speed to 16 knots and turned northwest, beginning a departure track that the Mustin sensors followed for the next 40 minutes until the cutter cleared the edge of the E-2D's tracking coverage. The Mustin continued her freedom of navigation track. She had not changed course during the encounter. She had not changed speed. Her operations had proceeded normally throughout. Flight deck operations. C. IC watch rotation. Engineering watch routines. The ordinary business of a warship at sea, conducted in the presence of a 12,000-ton Coast Guard cutter that had fired water at the ocean next to her 3 times. The after-action report was thorough. The intelligence annex was more thorough. The undocumented antenna arrays on the Haijing 3901's mast, the retroactively correlated emissions, the water cannon activation communications signatures, the upgraded cannon mount geometry, and the acoustic profile contributed by the P-8A were all formatted and distributed through the channels that receive this kind of product. The Haijing 3901 had come to the South China Sea to demonstrate Chinese resolve and capability to American warships operating in waters Beijing considers sovereign. It had demonstrated resolve. 3 water cannon activations represent a committed performance. It had demonstrated capability. The water cannon worked. The cutter maintained its station. The operations team executed their procedures. What it had not demonstrated was anything that affected the Mustin's operations, course, or speed by any measurable amount. What it had demonstrated for the SLQ-32, the SH-60B, and the P-8A was a comprehensive suite of electronic, acoustic, visual, and behavioral intelligence that updated several entries in the threat library and opened several new ones. Chinese state media covered the encounter at 4:30 p.m. The coverage described a successful CCG operation that had, quote, 8, quote, the American warship, and, quote, 9, quote, footage accompanied the coverage. The Haijing 3901 at sea, the water cannon in operation, the white column rising from the South China Sea surface. The footage was real. The water cannon had worked as designed. The column had been tall and white and impressive against the blue of the South China Sea and the clear morning sky. The Mustin appeared in 2 frames of the footage, at distance, continuing northeast. The coverage did not explain why the Mustin was continuing northeast. It did not explain what had been collected. It did not explain the undocumented antenna arrays or the emissions they had produced. It did not explain that the CCG shore facility's communications had tripled in volume during the 3rd activation, suggesting a level of senior oversight that the earlier activations had not required. It showed the water cannon. The water cannon was visually compelling. It was also, against the specific vessel it had been aimed at, the maritime equivalent of attempting to stop a freight train with a very enthusiastic garden hose. The boatswain's mate's question, "Sir, are they watering us?" did not appear in any official document, but it accurately characterized the operational dynamic of the morning, and it would circulate in the informal professional memory of the people who were on that bridge watch in the way that accurate and economical observations tend to circulate. The Mustin completed her freedom of navigation track at 2:15 p.m. and turned for her next assigned operating area. The South China Sea continued being the South China Sea. Beijing continued claiming it. The United States continued transiting it. The Haijing 3901 continued being 12,000 tons of Coast Guard cutter that is very effective against fishing boats and somewhat less effective against Aegis-equipped guided missile destroyers. The intelligence product was distributed. The threat library was updated. The water cannon, which had fired 3 times into international water and hit it reliably all 3 times, had done its job. So had everyone else. Bye for now.